The great crystal halls of the Galactic Council were filled with the sound of cruel laughter that echoed off the walls like thunder. Ambassador Hyun-woo stood in the center of the huge round chamber, wearing his simple black suit that looked so plain next to the bright shining robes and strange armor of the alien delegates. Above him, hundreds of different alien species sat in their floating chairs, looking down at him with eyes that glowed different colors or blinked in weird patterns, or sometimes had no eyes at all. The Vorthan delegate was the first to speak. His name was Commander Zex Prime, and he was tall and blue, with 4 strong arms that moved like snakes. His voice was deep and full of mockery when he said, "Humans want to join our great military alliance. These soft pink creatures who still fight their wars with simple metal bullets and old-fashioned explosives." The laughter got louder and more cruel as other aliens joined in. The bat-like Nexari creatures flapped, their huge leather wings in what passed for laughter among their kind, while the granite lords who looked like living mountains made deep rumbling sounds that shook the floor. The insect-like hive queens clicked their sharp mandibles together in rhythm, while the energy beings called Lightwalkers flickered and pulsed in patterns that meant they found something very funny. Council Leader. Vex 9 floated in the center of the room like a giant metal ball covered in blinking lights. His voice sounded like metal grinding against metal when he spoke. "Your human species has only been traveling in space for 50 of your short years. We have been moving between the stars for thousands and thousands of years. Your weapons are so primitive that they would not even scratch the paint on our oldest ships. Your vessels move through space so slowly that our children could walk faster. Your soldiers are just weak biological creatures made of soft meat that breaks and bleeds so easily." Snake Queen, who ruled the Serpentine Empire, raised her huge cobra-like head and spoke with a voice like poisonous honey. "We have conquered death itself, human. Our greatest warriors cannot be permanently killed because we have technology that brings them back to life again and again. What could your fragile, short-lived humans possibly offer to beings like us who have mastered the very forces of life and death?" More aliens began to speak up, each trying to outdo the others in their mockery of humanity. The Crystal Collective, who were made of living diamond, said that human technology was so backward it belonged in a museum. The Void Swimmers, who lived in the empty space between galaxies, said that humans were so slow and clumsy they would never survive real space combat. The Machine Empire declared that human intelligence was so limited they could not even understand basic galactic mathematics. Hour after hour, the insults continued. They called humans dirt crawlers because they came from a planet's surface instead of being born among the stars. They said humans were mayflies because their lives were so short compared to species that lived for thousands of years. They laughed at human courage, saying that bravery meant nothing when you were too weak to back it up. They mocked human intelligence, claiming that a species that had not even left their home solar system could not possibly understand the complex problems of galactic civilization. The Phantom Lords, who existed partially in another dimension, said that humans were so primitive they still believed in things like individual identity, instead of the collective consciousness that advanced species shared. The Time Walkers, who could see into possible futures, claimed they had looked ahead and seen only failure and embarrassment for any human military efforts. The Reality Shapers, who could change the laws of physics in small areas, said that humans were so limited by their basic understanding of science that they would never adapt to real galactic warfare. Ambassador Hyun-woo listened to every single insult and stored each one carefully in his memory. He kept his face completely calm and showed no emotion, even though inside he was burning with anger at how these aliens treated his species. His hands stayed clasped behind his back so no one could see them shake with rage. He had been chosen for this mission because he was known for staying cool under pressure. But this was testing even his legendary self-control. The mockery went on for so long that some of the alien delegates got bored and started having side conversations about other topics. They treated the human representative like he was not even worth their full attention. A few of the younger aliens started making jokes about what humans would look like when they tried to wear galactic military uniforms. Some suggested that humans should be kept as pets instead of being considered for military alliance. Finally, when The laughter started to die down, and the aliens began to think they had made their point clear enough. Ambassador Hyunwoo took a single step forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the huge chamber. "Give us one chance," he said. "Simply one test to prove what humans can do. If we fail completely, then we will never ask to join your alliance again. We will go back to our little planet and never bother the great Galactic Council with our primitive presence again." The aliens looked at each other with expressions that ranged from amusement to complete disbelief. What harm could there possibly be in letting these pathetic humans embarrass themselves one more time? It would be entertaining to watch them fail at something that real civilized species could handle easily. Plus, it would serve as a perfect example to any other primitive species that might get ideas above their station council. Leader Vex 9 Lights pulsed in a pattern that meant he was thinking carefully about this request. The other council members waited for his decision because, as the elected leader, his word was final. After a long moment that stretched out like forever, he finally spoke. "Very well, human. We will design a special test scenario that will demonstrate to the entire galaxy exactly why your species should remain on your small blue world and leave galactic affairs to civilizations that actually understand them. But we warn you, this test will not be easy or simple. It will be something that has challenged the greatest military minds in galactic history. If you fail, and you certainly will fail, the humiliation will be broadcast across every civilized world, so that all species will know that humans are not ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship." Ambassador Hyunwoo bowed formally to show respect, even though inside he was already planning how to make these arrogant aliens eat their words. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said. "We will not disappoint you." The laughter started up again, even louder than before, because every alien in the chamber was completely certain that these primitive humans would fail spectacularly and provide entertainment for the entire galaxy. None of them had any idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic military history. 3 weeks after the humiliating session at the Galactic Council, General Park Min-ho sat in the most secure military facility on Earth, reading a file that would have been pure science fiction just a few months earlier. The underground bunker was located deep beneath London and had been hastily converted from a Cold War relic into humanity's first alien contact headquarters. The 45-year-old SAS veteran had seen combat in every major conflict of the past 2 decades, but nothing had prepared him for what he was reading now. Across from him sat Director Kim So-young, who had been pulled from her position as head of military intelligence to run the newly created Human-Alien Relations Department. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had earned her reputation by solving impossible problems through careful planning and ruthless execution. Her voice was steady and professional as she began the briefing, but Min-ho could see the tension in her shoulders. "The Galactic Council has given us what they call the ultimate test," she said, sliding a holographic projector across the metal table. "They have named it the Black Hole Prison Break, and according to our alien contacts, it is considered the most impossible military operation in galactic history." The hologram flickered to life, showing a structure that seemed to twist and bend. Space around itself, like reality, was being folded into impossible shapes. Min-ho studied the image carefully, using his decades of military experience to analyze what he was seeing. The prison was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but it seemed to exist partially outside normal space, connected to the regular universe by a single heavily defended tunnel that looked like it had been carved through the fabric of reality itself. The whole thing orbited impossibly close to a black hole using alien technology that somehow prevented it from being torn apart by the massive gravitational forces. "Our mission," So-young continued, "is to extract one specific prisoner from this facility. His name is KL7, and he is a political dissident who has information that could prevent a major war between 2 of the largest galactic powers. But here is the part that makes this truly impossible. The prison has never been successfully breached in over 800 years of operation." She activated another section of the hologram, showing the prison's defensive systems. Layer after layer of protection surrounded the facility. Energy, shields that could vaporize entire fleets, automated defense platforms armed with weapons that human science could not even classify, and patrol ships from 6 different alien military forces. The inner defenses were even worse, gravity traps that could crush attackers into microscopic particles, mind control fields that turned infiltrators into willing prisoners, and security robots that could adapt their tactics to counter any known attack. Strategy. Minho whistled low as he took in the full scope of what they were asking humanity to attempt. Every alien species that has tried this mission has lost entire fleets, he said, reading from the intelligence report. The Vorthon Empire sent their best stealth ships and lost all of them. The Nexari used their shape-shifting abilities and still failed completely. The Machine Collective tried to hack the systems directly, and their entire cyber warfare division was destroyed. So Young nodded grimly. The Galactic Council is offering this mission to us as what they consider a cosmic joke. They expect us to fail so spectacularly that it will serve as entertainment for the entire galaxy and prove once and for all that humans are too primitive for galactic civilization. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. But we are not going to let that happen. What resources do we have? Minho asked, though. He suspected the answer would not be encouraging. So Young slid another file across the table. Officially, we have been given one small, stealth ship equipped with basic alien technology that is probably 50 years behind what the prison defenses can handle. Unofficially, I have been secretly assembling the best military team that humanity has ever put together. Minho opened the personnel file and began reading about his potential team members. Lieutenant Jae-sung was a Navy SEAL who had earned 3 medals of honor and was considered the best pilot in the entire U.S. military. Sergeant Yoon-ji came from the British SAS and had successfully completed more impossible missions than any soldier in the unit's history. Corporal Dong-wook was Delta Force and had never failed to complete an objective, no matter how dangerous Specialist Yu-jin was from the newly formed Space Marines, and had already proven herself in the first human conflicts beyond Earth. Each soldier represented the absolute peak of human military training and capability, but even the best humans seemed laughably inadequate when compared to alien technology that had been developing for thousands of years. The stealth ship they would be using was built with technology that humans barely understood, and weapons that might not even function properly in the strange physics near a black hole. When do we leave? Minho asked, because despite the impossible odds, he was already starting to think about how to approach this mission. So, Young checked her watch. Transport arrives in 6 hours. The Council expects us to spend months planning and preparing. Like every other species that has attempted this, they think we will need extensive time to study their technology and develop new strategies. Minho smiled for the first time since entering the briefing room. Instead, we are going to show them what humans can accomplish when we stop trying to think like aliens and start thinking like humans. We have one advantage that no other species in the galaxy possesses. What is that? So Young asked. We are completely unpredictable to them. Every alien military in the galaxy has been fighting the same way for thousands of years, using the same basic strategies and tactical principles that have been refined over millennia. But human military doctrine evolved in complete isolation from galactic civilization. Our approach to warfare is entirely outside their experience or understanding. So Young began to smile as well. You think we can succeed where every other species has failed? Minho stood up and began studying the holographic prison from different angles, looking for weaknesses that alien minds might have missed. I think we are about to teach the galaxy that sometimes being primitive and unpredictable is exactly what you need to solve an advanced problem. They are expecting us to attack this facility like civilized galactic citizens. Instead, we are going to hit them like the savage territorial primates that we have always been deep down inside. And that is going to make all the difference in the universe. The mission was impossible by every measure of galactic military science. But General Park Min-ho had built his entire career on proving that impossible was just another word for a challenge that nobody had figured out how to solve. Yet the aliens were about to learn why humans had fought their way to the top of their planet's food chain, despite being smaller, weaker, and slower than most of their competition. They were about to discover that sometimes the most primitive predator is the most dangerous one of all. The stealth ship. Silent thunder moved through space that defied every law of physics that humans had ever discovered. Stars stretched into impossible spirals that hurt to look at directly, while gravity seemed to pull in 6 different directions. At once, the very fabric of reality appeared to be twisted and warped around the massive black hole that dominated this region of space. Like a cosmic wound that refused to heal, Lieutenant Jae-sung gripped the pilot controls with white knuckles as he tried to navigate through conditions that should have torn their ship apart. His training had prepared him for every kind of extreme flying condition on Earth, but nothing could have prepared him for piloting near a black hole where the normal rules of space and time broke down completely. The ship groaned and creaked around them as alien technology fought to keep them alive in an environment that wanted to kill them. "Sensors are going crazy," he reported to General Minho, who stood behind the pilot's chair studying the tactical displays. "Space itself is acting like a living thing out here. The gravity fields keep shifting and our instruments can't get a solid reading on anything. The prison facility is still 3 hours away, but we are already seeing effects that should be impossible." Sergeant Yunji worked at the weapons console trying to understand alien technology that had been hastily installed on their human ship. Most of the controls had symbols that looked like abstract art, and the instruction manual had been translated through 4 different alien languages before reaching English. The result was technical documentation that read like poetry, written by a confused computer. "I think I have figured out how the defensive systems work," she said, pointing to a display that showed the prison surrounded by layers of colored light. "Each one of those energy barriers can destroy different types of ships. The red layer burns through physical armor. The blue layer disrupts electronic systems, and the green layer does something to living tissue that the translation calls soul freezing." Corporal Dongwook was checking their equipment for the 100th time since leaving Earth. Everything had been modified with alien technology that human engineers barely understood. Their body armor included force field generators, their weapons could fire energy blasts instead of bullets, and their communication systems could work across impossible distances. But none of them were completely sure that any of it would actually function when they needed it most. "The intelligence reports show 17 different defensive layers," he said, reading from a tablet that displayed information in 3 alien languages simultaneously. "Automated defense platforms that can track and destroy targets moving at near-light-speed patrol fleets from 6 different species that have never been defeated in battle, and weapon systems that can manipulate gravity itself to crush attacking." Ship specialist Yu Jin monitored the long-range scanners that were trying to penetrate the strange space around the black hole prison. The readings kept changing as waves of distorted energy washed over their ship, making it almost impossible to get accurate information about what they were facing. According to her instruments, the prison was simultaneously the size of a small moon and completely invisible, depending on which sensor array she used. "And those are just the outer defenses," she added. "The inner prison has security measures that have never been overcome in 800 years. Gravity traps that can increase local gravity to crush intruders, mind control fields that can turn attackers into willing slaves, and adaptive security. Robots that learn from every previous attack and become immune to the same tactics being used twice." General Minho listened to his team catalog the impossible challenges they faced while studying the tactical situation with the calm focus that had made him legendary in the SAS. The prison loomed ahead of them, looking like a metallic cancer, growing on the fabric of reality itself. It was connected to normal space by a single tunnel that sparkled with defensive energy and was guarded by alien warships that could each destroy a human city. "What is our biggest advantage?" he asked suddenly. The question surprised his team because, from their perspective, they had no advantages at all. They were 5 humans in a small ship facing defenses that had defeated entire alien civilizations, but Minho had not risen to the rank of general by accepting that any situation was truly hopeless. Specialist Yu Jin was the first to answer. "They have never faced humans before. Sir, every defense system, every tactical response, every security protocol has been designed to counter known galactic military strategies. But human approaches to warfare evolved in complete isolation from alien thinking." "Exactly." Minho smiled grimly. "We are not going to try to match their advanced technology or overwhelm their superior numbers. Instead, we are going to do something that has never occurred to any alien military mind in the history of galactic civilization. Sergeant Yoon-ji looked up from the weapons console. What do you have in mind? Sir Min-ho pointed to what appeared to be debris floating in the space around the prison. Scattered pieces of destroyed ships from previous failed rescue attempts. We are not going to sneak past their defenses or blast through them. We are going to pretend to be garbage. Lieutenant Jae-sung stared at him in disbelief. Sir, that is the most ridiculous plan I have ever heard. Which is exactly why it might work. The aliens have spent centuries perfecting their ability to detect and destroy military threats. But their sensors are programmed to ignore space junk and debris. The plan was so simple it was almost insulting. Use controlled explosions to damage their own ship, making it look like wreckage from a previous battle. Then tumble through space like debris caught in the black hole's gravity. Well, the alien sensors that were designed to identify deliberate movement patterns and energy signatures would completely ignore what appeared to be harmless, floating garbage. It goes against every instinct I have as a pilot, Jae-sung said, but he was already beginning to see how it could work. Their defensive systems are looking for ships that fly in formation, broadcast identification signals and follow predictable attack patterns. They would never expect an enemy to deliberately destroy their own stealth capabilities and approach like a piece of random junk. Corporal Dong-wook began preparing explosive charges to create realistic damage to their hull while Specialist Yu-jin calculated exactly how they would need to tumble through space to reach the maintenance shaft that Sergeant Yoon-ji had identified as their way into the prison. The timing would have to be perfect, and they would get exactly one chance to make it work. This is either the most brilliant tactical innovation in military history, Yoon-ji said, as she suited up for the most dangerous spacewalk ever attempted, or it is going to get us all killed in the most embarrassing way possible. Min-ho checked his own equipment one final time, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. Either we prove that human military thinking deserves respect, or we become a cautionary tale that alien parents tell their children about what happens to species that reach too far above their station. The silent thunder began its final approach to the black hole prison disguised as floating wreckage and carrying the hopes of an entire species that refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. What happened next became the stuff of legends that would be told in military academies across the galaxy for thousands of years. The silent thunder tumbled through space like a broken piece of debris spinning end over end in a pattern that looked completely random but was actually carefully controlled by Lieutenant Jae-sung, who had to fight against every instinct he had developed as a pilot. The alien defense systems that surrounded the black hole prison were the most advanced military technology. In galactic history, energy cannons that could vaporize moon-sized asteroids swept back and forth across the space around the facility, searching for enemies that moved with purpose and followed predictable flight patterns. Sensor arrays that could detect a single alien heartbeat from millions of kilometers away scanned continuously for the energy signatures of known military vessels. But none of these incredible defensive systems paid any attention to what appeared to be a chunk of destroyed spaceship caught in the gravitational chaos around the black hole. The wreckage tumbled past defense platforms that could have reduced it to atoms in microseconds, while automated targeting systems dismissed it as harmless space junk not worth the energy it would take to vaporize inside the spinning ship. General Min-ho and his team held on as their world spun wildly around them. The artificial gravity systems had been deliberately damaged to make their tumbling motion look more realistic, but it meant that everyone aboard was experiencing the kind of motion sickness that would have incapacitated most people. Sergeant Eun-ji prepared for her spacewalk, while trying not to lose her lunch as the ship rotated in 3 dimensions at once. Approaching the first defense perimeter, Jae-sung whispered through gritted teeth, even though sound could not travel through the vacuum of space. The massive energy barriers that had stopped every previous rescue attempt flickered and pulsed, just meters away from their ship, close enough that the raw power made their hull plates vibrate. But the defensive systems continued to ignore what looked like ordinary debris. The Vorthon patrol ships that guarded this section of space were among the most advanced military vessels in the galaxy. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a human city, and their crews had centuries of experience in space combat. They flew in perfect formations following patrol patterns that had been refined over hundreds of years of defending the prison. But their sophisticated sensor systems were programmed to identify threats based on deliberate movement and military energy signatures, not random space. Junk 1 of the Vorthan cruisers passed so close to the silent thunder that Corporal Dong-wook could see individual lights through the alien ship's viewports. The 4 armed Vorthan crew members went about their duties completely unaware that they had just missed the most important military infiltration in galactic history by less than 50 meters. Their scanners showed nothing but drifting wreckage that posed no threat to anyone. Sergeant Yoon-ji launched herself from the ship during a brief moment when their spinning motion aligned perfectly with the maintenance shaft she had identified as their way into the prison. She drifted through space using only tiny puffs of compressed air for course correction, moving so slowly that the motion detection systems dismissed her as a piece of debris too small to be worth noticing. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for a human body and had been designed by alien architects who never considered that any species would be crazy enough to attempt infiltration through such an impossible route. It twisted through the prison structure, following a path that would have been difficult for any known galactic species to navigate. But human flexibility and the training that Yoon-ji had received in cave exploration and urban infiltration made it just barely possible. Inside the shaft, she encountered security measures that had killed dozens of alien infiltrators over the centuries. Laser grids that could slice through military armor moved in patterns designed to catch anyone trying to crawl through the narrow space. But these systems had been calibrated for alien body types and movement patterns, not for a human trained in gymnastics and martial arts, who could bend and twist in ways that no galactic species had ever demonstrated. Pressure. Sensors that could detect the weight of a falling feather were placed at regular intervals along the shaft, ready to trigger massive security responses if they detected an intruder. But Yoon-ji had learned techniques for distributing her body weight from years of rock climbing and mountaineering. She moved through the sensor field like a ghost, spreading her weight across multiple contact points and using breathing techniques to minimize even the tiny air currents. Her movement created genetic scanners that could identify the DNA signature of every known species in the galaxy, swept the shaft continuously looking for biological traces that would indicate an infiltrator. But these systems had never encountered human genetic material before, and their databases had no reference point for identifying Earth-based life forms. The scanners detected her presence but classified her as some kind of unknown microorganism, not worth triggering an alert. Meanwhile, back on the Silent Thunder, the rest of the team prepared for the most audacious diversion in military history. General Min-ho had studied the prison schematics for weeks, learning how the alien security systems worked and identifying their weaknesses. The facility had been designed by committee with input from 6 different alien species, each contributing their own ideas about how to create the perfect prison. This collaborative approach had created a security system that was incredibly sophisticated but also predictable, because it followed established galactic protocols. The alien guards had centuries of experience dealing with known threats, and their response patterns were based on thousands of years of refined military doctrine, but they had never encountered an enemy that deliberately ignored conventional tactics. Specialist Yu-jin used the prison computer network against itself, triggering false alarms in 17 different sections simultaneously. Each alarm was designed to look like a genuine security breach, complete with sensor readings that indicated the presence of different types of alien infiltrators. The computer systems had been programmed to respond to each type of threat with specific protocols that made perfect sense for containing known galactic military tactics. The Granite Lord Guards, who were responsible for the eastern section, received alerts indicating Nexari shapeshifters in their area and immediately implemented containment procedures designed for that specific threat. The Serpentine security forces in the northern wing detected what appeared to be Vorthan energy signatures and began following anti-Vorthan protocols. The Machine Empire robots that patrolled the central core registered readings that suggested reality shaper infiltration and activated defenses specifically designed to counter that species' abilities. Within minutes, the entire prison security force was running around, following predetermined response patterns that had been developed over centuries of dealing with galactic military threats. But none of these responses were designed to handle what was actually happening. 5 humans using tactics that had never been seen before in the history of galactic civilization. Corporal Dong Wook moved through the prison corridors using urban warfare techniques that had been developed in the cities of Earth. He treated the facility like a hostile neighborhood, rather than a space station moving from cover to cover, using misdirection and confusion to avoid detection. His approach was so far outside galactic military doctrine that the security systems simply did not know how to respond. The automated defense systems began experiencing what could only be described as mechanical confusion. Their programming told them to identify and counter threats, but the threats they were facing did not match any known patterns in their databases. Security robots that had been designed to adapt to alien strategies found themselves unable to predict human behavior because human military thinking had evolved along completely different evolutionary lines. This was the moment when the galaxy began to understand that humanity brought something entirely new to galactic civilization. Not superior technology or greater physical strength, but a completely different way of thinking about problems that had been considered solved for millennia. The age of predictable galactic warfare was about to end, and the age of human tactical innovation was just beginning. Deep in the maximum security section of the black hole prisoner, Kale 7 sat in his cell as he had for the past 43 years, counting the days since his imprisonment for the crime of speaking truth to the Galactic Council, the Ancient, being belonged to one of the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy, and had lived long enough to see the rise and fall of entire civilizations. His people, the Eternal Watchers, had been exploring the stars when most of the current galactic powers were still primitive tribes fighting over water sources on their home planets. The cell was a masterpiece of alien prison technology, a cube of pure energy that prevented escape through any known method. The walls could not be broken because they were not actually solid matter but rather controlled force fields that could be adjusted to counter any attempt at freedom. The floor beneath his feet was actually a gravity manipulation system that could increase its pull to crush him into paste. If he tried anything the computer systems considered threatening. Kale 7 had given up hope of rescue decades ago. Every major power in the galaxy had political reasons to keep him locked away, because the information he possessed could start or prevent wars that would reshape the balance of power across known space. He had watched through his energy window as rescue attempts were made by various species over the years, and had seen them all fail spectacularly against the prison's impossible defenses, when a strange figure in primitive-looking armor appeared in his cell doorway. He assumed that his mind was finally beginning to break down from the long years of solitary confinement. The figure was smaller than most galactic species and moved in a way that seemed somehow different from the fluid grace of advanced alien beings. There was something almost primitive about the way this creature held itself, like a predator that had evolved on a world where survival required constant alertness. "You Kale 7," the figure asked, and the voice that came through the translation device was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was rough and direct without the elaborate courtesy that marked civilized galactic communication. The prisoner studied his unexpected visitor with eyes that had seen the birth of stellar empires and tried to identify what species this could possibly be. The armor looked functional rather than elegant, designed for protection and efficiency rather than displaying the wearer's status or cultural affiliation. The weapons were clearly advanced technology, but they had been modified in ways that suggested someone who understood practical combat rather than ceremonial warfare. Most interesting of all the beings, movements showed training and discipline, but not the kind of refined martial arts practiced by galactic military forces. You are not Vorthan, not Nixari, not Serpentine, not any species I recognize. Kale 7 said, studying his visitor carefully. "What are you, and why do you move like a creature that learned to fight on a world where death was always just one mistake away?" Sergeant Yunji began working on the cell-locking mechanism with tools that would have seemed laughably primitive to most galactic engineers but were perfectly suited for the task she faced. Human engineering had always focused on making tools that worked reliably under adverse conditions, rather than creating elegant technology that impressed other civilizations. The lock that held Kale 7 was incredibly sophisticated, but it had been designed to counter known galactic infiltration methods. not the straightforward mechanical approach that humans used. "I am human," she replied, as sparks flew from the locking mechanism. "From Earth. We are here to get you out." The prisoner watched in amazement as she bypassed security systems that had been designed by the greatest engineers in galactic history, using techniques that looked almost primitive but were incredibly effective. Humans, Kyle 7 repeated, trying to place the name. The species that the Galactic Council mocks as primitive warriors who still fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. Yunji smiled grimly as the first layer of the cell security deactivated. The same ones. Turns out that being primitive has some serious advantages when you are facing people who think they have seen everything. She worked with practiced efficiency, dismantling alien technology using principles of engineering that had been developed by a species that learned to solve problems through trial and error, rather than elegant theoretical frameworks. The cell security systems had been designed to resist sophisticated attacks using advanced technology, but they had never been tested against someone who approached the problem like a human mechanic fixing a broken engine. Meanwhile, throughout the rest of the prison, General Minho and his team were creating chaos using methods that would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. They had turned the prison's own security systems against itself by triggering responses that made perfect sense individually, but created total confusion when they all happened at the same time. The alien guards were following, their training perfectly rushing to respond to threats that appeared to match known attack patterns. But what they did not understand was that these were not separate, unrelated incidents, but rather parts of a single coordinated plan that used their own protocols against them. Each response took guards away from areas where the humans actually needed to move, creating clear paths through the facility. Corporal Dong-wook had found a service corridor that ran parallel to the main security checkpoint and was using demolition techniques developed for urban warfare to create his own entrance. The alien architects had built the prison to withstand attacks from known galactic weapons, but they had never considered someone who would simply blow holes in walls using primitive explosives placed at structurally weak points. Specialist Yujin was in the main computer center, downloading information using hacking techniques that bore no resemblance to the elegant cyber warfare methods practiced by galactic civilizations. Human computer specialists had learned their trade by breaking into systems that were actively defended by other humans, creating an adversarial approach to technology that was completely foreign to species that had developed their digital systems cooperatively. The prison security robots were experiencing something that their creators had never anticipated: total tactical confusion. Their adaptive programming told them to learn from each encounter and develop countermeasures. But human tactics were so different from established galactic military doctrine that the robots could not find patterns to analyze. They kept trying to apply solutions that worked against alien strategies to enemies who were not following any recognizable tactical framework. Lieutenant Jae-sung kept the Silent Thunder in position, using flying techniques that no alien pilot would have attempted. The ship was balanced in the chaotic gravity fields around the black hole using minute adjustments that required the kind of intuitive understanding of physics that came from learning to fly in atmospheres where the slightest mistake meant death. His approach was far too dangerous for any civilized pilot to risk, but it kept their escape route ready. Back in the cell, KL-7 watched as the final security barrier dissolved under Yunji's determined assault. The door that had held him for over 4 decades swung open, and for the first time since his imprisonment he felt hope. The human woman extended her hand to him in a gesture that was somehow both primitive and profound. "Time to go," she said simply. "Your galaxy is about to learn that sometimes the most advanced problems require the most basic solutions." As they prepared to leave, KL-7 realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had been dismissed as too primitive for civilized society was accomplishing what the most advanced military forces in the galaxy had failed to achieve. And they were doing it not by matching alien capabilities, but by bringing something entirely new to the challenge. The prisoner, who had spent decades studying the rise and fall of civilizations, understood that he was seeing the birth of a new era in galactic affairs. The age of predictable warfare conducted according to established protocols was ending, and the age of human tactical innovation was about to reshape everything that the galaxy thought it knew about military strategy. The escape from the black hole prison would be remembered not just as a successful rescue mission, but as the moment when humanity announced its arrival on the galactic stage in a way that could never be ignored or dismissed again. The escape from black hole prison sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council that were felt on 1,000 worlds. What should have been a simple demonstration of human inadequacy had become the most successful prison break in galactic history. More importantly, the methods used by General Minho's team were being studied by military analysts across known space. Council leader Vex 9 called an emergency session as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "The humans have done something impossible," announced the Vorthon military attaché, his forearms trembling with excitement. "They infiltrated a facility that has never been breached, using tactics we have never seen." The Serpentine Queen, who had mocked human fragility just weeks before, spoke with newfound respect. "Their approach to warfare is completely outside our understanding. They use deception, flexibility, and unpredictability in ways we had never considered." But the real revolution came when Kale 7 began sharing what he had learned during his rescue. The political dissident, now free to speak, revealed information that prevented a war between two galactic superpowers. More importantly, he spoke about his human rescuers with an awe that infected every being who heard his story. "They do not have our advanced technology or our extended lifespans," Kale 7 told the assembled delegates. "But they have something we have forgotten in our millennia of civilization. They have the ability to think in ways that surprise even themselves. They adapt, improvise, and overcome obstacles by refusing to accept that those obstacles cannot be overcome." General Minho stood before the same council that had mocked humanity just months before. But now, instead of laughter, there was respectful silence. "You asked what humans could offer your alliance," he said simply. "We offer a different perspective. While you have perfected the science of war, we have retained its art. We think differently because we evolved differently, and sometimes thinking differently is exactly what you need." The vote to admit humanity to the Galactic Military Alliance was unanimous. But more than just a political victory, it represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood warfare, strategy, and the value of diversity in thinking. Humanity had earned their place not by matching alien capabilities, but by bringing something entirely new to the galactic community. The age of human involvement in galactic affairs had begun, and the universe would never be the same. General Park Min-ho returned to Earth as a hero, but more importantly, as the man who had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive approach is exactly what's needed to solve the most advanced problems.